The internet is a big dumpster.
I'm white, and I've got everything I need. No one clutches their purses when they're in a room alone with me. And I can drive for any neighborhood I please at any hour, and the police don't do a thing. So if I see a penny on the ground, I leave it alone and fucking flip it. I'm a straight white male in America. I've got everything I need. I'm a guy getting paid more than a girl with a degree. And I can walk down the streets after dark, no one wants to rape me. And I can get a girl pregnant and just as easily flee. Just like my straight white male dad did to me. So if I see a penny on the ground, I leave it alone and fucking flip it. I'm a straight white male in America. I've got all the luck I need. I've got a pile of broken mirrors and I'm walking under ladders and I'm spilling tons of salt, but to me that doesn't matter, cause my skin and my gender and my orientation are the best things to have if you live in this nation. I recommend it highly. If I see a penny on the ground, I leave it alone and fucking flip it. I'm a straight white male in America. I've got all the luck I need. Shit's gonna work out for me, cause I'm a straight white male in America. I've got all the luck I need.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Intellectual Dollar Tree. We do the show live every Wednesday at 7 p.m. Pacific right here on Twitch. That's twitch.tv/Echoplex Media. If you're listening on the podcast, make sure you follow the Twitch channel. Even if you never watch, that follower number going up makes my ego feel good. While it is still legal for you to support this program, you can do so at echoplexmedia.com. Click the support tab and, I don't know, pick your favorite way, buy some merch, whatever. And as long as Grindr is still legal and has not been purchased by Apartheid Clyde, you can find me on there, but only if you're in the right zip code. I'm Producer Dave.
And I am Sylph. Used to go by HK Perrin, but now I go by Sylph. You can find me on Mastodon at hperrin at port87.social.
Cool. I was wondering, is there like a Mastodon server called like Mastodon that is just all porn? And if there isn't, why?
If there isn't, there definitely should be.
So, I have been waiting to listen to an episode of another podcast because I wanted to go over this guy on my own podcast and not be influenced by some other shit libs over at Decoding the Gurus. HK, what do you know about Curtis Yarvin?
Nothing. I guess I know that their name is Curtis Yarvin.
He is the favorite philosopher of friends of ours. J.D. Vance, Peter Thiel, Jason Calacanis, David Sachs, Mark Andreessen, all of the ghouls who are Silicon Valley ghouls, and J.D. Vance, who happens to be the vice president of the United States. So he has some ideas about something he calls the Dark Enlightenment. People are call him the founder of the New Right, and in the end, I think from what I did a little like cursory research, I think he's just a fucking monarchist, honestly.
Well, the New Right, or modern conservatives want a monarchy, so yeah, sounds right.
I don't think that it means like the New Right. I don't think it means like modern conservatism. I think it's like supposedly like a school of thought, like, you know how postmodernism doesn't really mean that like the things that we do today aren't modern.
Yeah.
I think it's like one of those. So I don't think it really means that, but I am not sure. So I found one that was more recent, but it was from the New York Times, and I've been getting hit with copyright from some people lately, so I'm not going to go ahead and run the one from the New York Times, at least not on the podcast part of the show. So we've got something from Unheard, which, they're geniuses, right? Because they have almost 500,000 subscribers, but you can't hear the people that are on there. They're unheard. And also it's like unheard spelled Herd. So you're not part of the herd. So I just wanted to let everybody know that we're going to watch an interview with the most clever IDW adjacent YouTube channel.
Follow all these people, and then you're not part of the herd.
Right. That is correct. Unheard famously has had every ghoul that we cover on IDT on. Every one of them. Except maybe Steven Pinker. I don't know. Maybe Steven Pinker was on there. Anyway, here is Welcome to the Dark Enlightenment with Curtis Yarvin. And I just want to remind everybody this is before the presidential election. So if any of the stuff here sounds like it's from before the presidential election, that's because it is.
You mean not just the inauguration, but the election?
Yeah, before the election. Oh my God, they do it. Oh no, they're doing that Q&A thing in this thing where it's like the world's worst fucking piano bar.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Unheard Club. For those of you joining us for the first time, I always sound a bit like an air hostess when I do this. A very special welcome to you, and thank you for braving the new season, the wind and rain, to get here and be with us tonight. Tonight, no doubt you'll know our guest already, but I will introduce him anyway. He's a political theorist and, dare I say, provocateur. He is the author of Unqualified Reservations, a kind of extraordinary oblique blog that he wrote under the pseudonym Mencius Moldbug. He is now author.
Oh yeah, this guy had like a fucking he had a pseudonym that he wrote under, and it wasn't that it was fascist. Not that some of the ideas didn't seem kind of fashy, but it was certainly like monarchist.
Okay.
And it's not like how Samuel Clemens wrote as Mark Twain, because that was cool as fuck. It's like the opposite of that.
The Grey Mirror Substack, which has a similarly oblique style, I would say. He's the godfather of the Red Pill movement, a kind of leading light.
Oh, get the fuck out of here. Everybody claims to be that. Get the shit out of here. We watched that movie, The Red Pill, where like they thought it was Sarga. Do you remember that? I made you sit there, that fucking terrible fucking MRA documentary.
What an awful thing to be, too.
And all they're doing is ripping off a fucking movie they don't understand. In the end.
In the New Right in the US, and infamously advocates for monarchy. He's not a royalist, rather he's a kind of equal opportunities supporter of absolute power, which is something I'm sure we'll get into this evening. His name.
So he's a fascist.
Yep. Like imagine proudly exclaiming, "I invented fathers beating their children." that was me. All me.
Oh boy. So wanting a strong person, in this guy's case, almost certainly a man, to have absolute power, that's not a monarchy, right? A monarchy generally is like a thing where it's dumb, but it's like a bloodline thing where this family, essentially, this family and probably other related families, or through some thing that they, I don't know, it's not, is it inbreeding when it's your third cousin? Who knows? What does twice removed mean? Don't know. But this is fascism, right? This is not monarchy. If it's not like a royalist thing, then it's just fascism. He just wants a strong man. Yes. Now, we're only 1 minute and 8 seconds in, and I could be grossly mischaracterizing this huge thinker here.
Dictatorship, I guess you'd call it.
Yeah, sure. I guess a dictator. Yeah. But I guess the dictator might not be a fascist, but generally, people with those kinds of ambitions tend not to be the greatest folks in the world. Certainly don't have the rights and even possible privileges of their, I was going to say subjects, citizens in mind. God save the Queen.
Of course, Curtis Yarvin, join me in welcoming him to the Unheard Club. Curtis, I'm going to start by reading back to you something that you've written about, which is a very annoying thing to do, but I'm going to do it anyway. You mentioned on a recent blog post some instructions that Louis XIV gave to his son, and they go a bit like this. Nothing can so securely establish the happiness and tranquility of a country as the perfect combination of authority in the single person of the sovereign. The greatest subdivision in this respect often produces the greatest calamities. So I suppose that's an obvious place to start. Is the civic calamity, or whatever you might call it, that America is facing right now, a fault of democracy?
When you use the word democracy, of course, you're using a very, very loaded and complex word. And, you know, the meaning of the...
No, it's not a loaded... fuck, I'm going to hate this. You're not going to get me as mad. Usually you're the one who like fucking freaks out on these people. I'm going to get hella mad at this because this is going to be adjacent to that. Well, it's a constitutional republic. Well, no, democracy just means you vote for people. That's all. Well,
that's representative democracy.
Right. Okay, democracy means you get to vote for something.
Yeah.
And then, you can add suffixes to it or adjectives to it. But yeah,
like a direct democracy would mean you get to vote on all of the laws.
Sounds like fucking chaos. That's the exact opposite of what this guy wants, right?
Yep.
Just about. If everyone has to say, this guy is very unhappy about it.
One of the simplest examples of kind of what's going on here that I ever came up with was simply to examine the words democracy and politics and note that they mean the same thing, but they have opposite emotional valences. And so anything...
No, they don't. What? Wait, democracy and politics?
They don't mean the same. I mean, in a democratic society or in a society where, in a democratic society, I suppose if you're interested in politics, well, then a big part of that is going to be the democratic process or whatever process by which your society has decided that you get a say or that people get a say is sure, but that's not the whole politics. There are politics in dictatorships too.
Yeah. Like this guy's just 100% wrong about that. They're not synonyms at all.
So I think this guy's a philosopher. That's always a red flag too, isn't it, these days? It used to not be, but
I'm interested to see how he justifies what he just said.
Anything political is bad. If we were to democratize foreign policy, that would be good. But if we were to politicize it, that would be bad.
But you're just talking about stupid people now.
And again, like that solely depends on whether you live under a democracy. If you don't, then the word political does not mean democratic.
And I think like when most people say, oh, you're politicizing this, I think they're saying that you're making it partisan.
Yeah.
That's generally they don't, you're making it a partisan thing because the hell of shit's political. Like how my water gets to my apartment is political.
Yep.
Apparently we believe in democracy without politics, which is a rather strange thing to believe in if you think about it. That sort of...
Well, if you think about what you just said, then you end up bashing your head against your keyboard.
Who thinks we live in a democracy without politics? Does anyone think that? I don't even think children think that.
I don't even think children know. A child wouldn't have to know that much about democracy or politics for them to realize that there's politics in a democracy. As soon as a child would know what either of those things is, they'd figure out the other one has something to do with it. Probably.
Yeah.
This is amazing. I do like her. I like her fit though. I fucking love polka dots. You could just disarm me with polka dots at any point.
Reminds me anyway of an interesting fact, which is that some people would say,
well, like it is kind of this trope that people on the right in America tend to not like things to be political, quote unquote. They'll say things like keep politics out of my beer. And when they're saying that, generally what they're saying is like, I don't want to see ladies on the can of my beer. And I especially don't want to see trans people drinking my beer.
But the politics of alcohol is actually really interesting. And historically, we had an amendment to the Constitution about alcohol. Alcohol is political. Yeah. The fact that you have to show your ID to get in a bar should demonstrate to you that alcohol is fucking political. But the other thing
But yeah, when they're saying like keep politics out of blah blah blah, what they're saying is what I believe is not politics, but what you believe is politics. So if something that I believe isn't shown to me in a product and something that you believe is shown to me in a product, that's the product being political.
So it's like and I'm dealing with this in another, like the fallout of this in another space. It's like in this video that I've had to fucking show to like 900 or former Scientologists or Scientology like researchers. There's this video called How to Radicalize a Normie. And there's this idea in places like if you get into like video games, they used to say, oh, there's no politics here, right? No politics in this space. There used to just be all kinds of places where like we don't do politics in this space, right? And what that means inevitably is like that you're gonna make room for racists, essentially racists and homophobes or whatever, because they'll come in and they'll be like, oh, I don't know, why is the character black? And somebody goes, what the fuck do you care why the character's black, you racist? And then they go, this is a no politics space. Fucking drive that
right.
wedge into the space, right?
Yeah, like the protagonist must be a white, straight, cis man. If it's not, then it's political.
Right. And we had the same thing, and I don't want to spend too much time on this, but I've been covering it. We had the same thing in the anti-Scientology community, where this guy was running around going on fucking Rick Wiles' fucking show and just acting a fucking fool. And fucking, he was like clearly like at least comfortable with like racist and homophobic tropes and people. But to criticize him for that would be politics, which is really interesting because he was running for Clearwater City Council when all these things about him came out. And it's like, well, he's sort of a political figure now, isn't he? But this is, when people say they want to keep politics out of stuff, they generally, it's either, if it's liberals, they just mean partisanship generally, I think. But I think what we were talking about here, a lot of conservatives, or maybe they don't even think of themselves as conservatives, people with like racist ideas, basically think that, that the things that they take for granted are just, ideas, just things that people think, and that for you to examine it through maybe an anti-racist lens or an anti-homophobia lens, well, now you're the one making it political.
Believe in, if you think about it, that sort of reminds you, or reminds me anyway, of an interesting fact, which is that some people would say that the least democratic nation on earth is North Korea. But in fact, if you look at the name of North Korea, and North Korea is very much an absolute monarchy, and I'm happy to talk about why that doesn't exactly apply in the North Korean case. But if you look at the name of the official name of North Korea, it's the DPRK, and that is 3 euphemisms for democracy and 1 place name. And so
the DPRK is the Democratic People's Republic of Korea, but they're just lying to you. This isn't that interesting.
Yeah.
It's how, when Germany was split in two during the Cold War, the communist side was called the German Democratic Republic. That's the GDR. And many would argue that that was not a democratic republic. It turns out you can just call shit whatever you want, actually.
Yep.
This guy, I'm sorry, this is supposed to be like a fucking big thinker here. This isn't even like getting high in your dorm room in freshman year stuff so far.
But you know what's funny is people like this, when they see something like the Democratic People's Republic of Korea, they'll think, oh, that's a lie. They're not democratic at all. But then they see something labeled as like communist, and they're like, that is the truest form of communism because I don't like it. When it's like, that's not communism. That's a dictatorship.
Oh, and you can have a communist dictatorship.
True. But like, it's not like China's not communist.
Yeah, it's like Avalon and Babylon in the chat. It's like how Greenland called themselves Greenland, even though they're covered in fucking snow. I wonder if Trump knows that. Anyway, we should.
It's a democratic republic.
Democratic People's Republic of Korea.
Is this why we have a kind of, when people say don't talk about politics over dinner, but no one would ever say don't talk about democracy over dinner?
Sure. And so, democracy has become, which was actually most people don't even know that to the American founders, or at least many of the American founders.
What if it's don't talk about politics every night at dinner? What if we did that instead?
The word democracy is a curse word. It's considered like, extremely harmful. Actually, one of the funniest ironies there.
A direct democracy, sure.
Available in the world today is if you go to these pages change all the time. If you go to the Wikipedia page for Athenian democracy, there's an observation by a modern historian that it's very strange that people have been.
Does he mean modern as in like yesterday, or modern as in the modernist tradition that was before postmodernism, which is actually the modern tradition?
But like the founders of the United States were not fans of direct democracy, but you can't argue that they weren't fans of democratic republics because they made their country a democratic republic.
In this system, as we say, people have been trying to produce, trying to imitate the glories of Athenian democracy. And the funny thing about this, as the historian accurately notes, is that everyone who experienced Athenian democracy in sort of the age of Pericles and beyond, who wrote about it, whose writings we have, thought it was the most terrible system ever. I mean, Athenian democracy.
Yeah, but that might be because the people who had access to the tools to write were the fucking oligarch class. And so they weren't too big into any like representation of the people who didn't have access to the tools to write at the time. Because this wasn't like just grabbing a piece of paper out of a drawer. Like it was being able to write was it was a upper class sort of thing during.
Yeah, but I don't know if Athenian democracy is direct democracy, but like direct democracy does have problems that the founders discussed in their papers. The biggest being the what's it called? The rule of the majority.
The tyranny of the majority.
Yeah, tyranny of the majority. So the founders were trying to balance this republic.
I don't think the Greek system was a direct democracy. I think it was electing representatives.
Okay. But yeah, like the founders were trying to balance this republic to find some equilibrium between tyranny of the majority and tyranny of the minority.
Well, there's also an argument that they were just doing things to entrench their own power and the power of the people in their in-group too. But that's a whole different matter.
If you take them at their words, then yeah.
Beyond, who wrote about it, whose writings we have, thought it was the most terrible system ever. I mean, Athenian democracy literally executes Socrates, the founder of modern philosophy. And so, when you get into kind of running down these Orwellian euphemisms and you get into
But what if most people wanted fucking Socrates fucking executed? And it was just that they didn't have the access to like the ability to write. And even if they did write it down, who the fuck was going to keep it after they died? Because they weren't like noble people. They weren't the upper crust of society. So we don't know actually what most people thought. I don't think the state should be murdering people in general, but that's different.
Does this word mean democracy? You're getting into sort of the holy of holies. You're getting into sort of a mysterious question. So let me, back up a little bit and focus on, what is the strange thing that Louis XIV means when he says this? Well, even, here in what's kind of a center of monarchy, it's a center of symbolic monarchy. And, we have Charles III going up on stage. He would never dream of saying off with his head. And if he said off with his head,
at least.
Not in public. And if he said off with his head, he would not at all expect to be obeyed. And yet, if you look around you, basically, go home, look around you, you'll notice that everything you have that works was made in a monarchy or by a monarchy or both. So,
wait, what? If you look around, I want to make sure that he said what I think he just said.
Go home, look around you. You'll notice that everything you have that works was made in a monarchy or by a monarchy or both. So
what does he mean, everything that you have that works? Hold on.
This beer was made in Mexico.
This iPhone.
I don't think Mexico is a democracy.
So, for example, this iPhone.
Sorry, monarchy.
This iPhone was produced by Apple, which is a monarchy. That is, it's a corporation.
What?
That's what he means? What the fuck?
Somebody in chat
not a
called
monarchy.
that. Somebody in chat just called that before he said it. Either they've seen this before, or either that or that person should have their own show because they're fucking smarter than we are. Yeah, that's a company. It's a corporation.
The divine right of CEOs.
So I guess you could say that it's structured like a monarchy because the CEO is like has the board, which could be like their court. But then like the investors can oust the CEO. So who are the investors like the god that it doesn't work. It doesn't work.
And the shareholders can oust the board.
Right. And this works. This is like that a corporation is more like a potential French Revolution at all times.
A corporation, I would say, is more closer to like most corporations, more closer to a democracy, except that the people can't vote, the shares can vote, you know?
Right. It's like it's like a distillation of oligarchy.
Yeah, an oligarchy.
Yeah.
Yep.
A corporation is very much.
I mean, it's capitalist, right?
It's a corporation. You know, a corporation is very much the definition of an absolute monarchy. The CEO is.
It is not at all. What the fuck? Corporations don't get handed down to the sons of the CEO. What the fuck is he talking about?
Right. There are family businesses that get handed down, but that's not usually the people managing the company. That's ownership of the company versus management of the company, right? Like somebody's fail son or fail daughter. We should probably talk more about fail daughters just to be, just to be a little more inclusive around here. Fail they, them. They might get handed down the company, but fucking damn straight, whoever's fucking running the company is probably still running the company, because if the fucking fail son takes over the company's going to be the fail company. They don't know what the fuck they're doing. They just been spending Pops' money all their life, probably on cocaine or something, and good for them. That's not the worst way to live. But this is incredibly dumb.
Yep.
This is like their philosopher king too. They think that this is supposed to be some kind of genius. A fail spring. I like it. Fail spring. We got from the chat a fail spring.
Like, I think that he's thinking more of like the mob. Like the mafia tends to like, power is passed down along bloodlines.
But not even then. Even the mob doesn't
not
necessarily
always,
work like that, because sometimes the mob, you fucking kill your own family members if you gotta. Like, it's just a little more cutthroat.
I mean, that happens in monarchies too.
Yeah.
Monarchy, the CEO it's not quite absolute because the CEO is accountable to a board. Sometimes it is absolute. Mark Zuckerberg, for example, is not accountable to anyone. He controls his own board.
That's just because he has majority share of the company, like majority voting share of the company.
Special class of shares that he owns the majority of. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's just like a dictatorship. That's not like a monarchy. It was like he did a coup on his own company before it really existed, is all that happened.
Are you sure this guy is a philosopher?
That's what they all say.
He just sounds like a high school dropout who gets stoned at home all the time.
I mean, some of those people are cooler than this guy. In fact, most of them probably are. None of them are unheard.
Yeah.
Are limited by the power of the state. And when you basically look at what Apple is able to do as an absolute monarchy with a CEO, which is just a euphemism for king.
No, it's not.
No, we wouldn't need a euphemism. You could just be the king of Apple, which would be a funny thing to call yourself, actually.
The king of Apple.
I would listen, I'm trying to think of like a fun, interesting, good tech company. But if one of these people, back when people didn't know that they were all monsters, if they called themselves like the king of WeWork, or that'd have been funny, actually. I think about it. WeWork guy would have called himself the king of WeWork as he fed his employees acid and basically told them they had to do it. Fucking work-life balance there was horrible for the people that worked there. Not only were you expected to go to the company party, you kind of had to do LSD. Not a great scene.
That's horrifying.
I bet this guy was invited.
Produces this incredible device. Imagine if this incredible device had to be produced by the California Department of Cell Phone.
Like, I feel like he's just talking about structure. He's just saying all structures are monarchies.
By the California Department of Cell Phones. Some kind of
Well, they would, if that was like, they would have a supply, they would be able to do it. If such a thing, now we tried to start it tomorrow, sure, it would be a while. But there would be a supply chain in place. I don't know. Would the California government produce a good phone? Who fucking knows? They didn't try it. We don't live in that society. That's the fucking that's like fucking communist society.
I tell you what, the California government wouldn't have taken away our headphone jack.
Gotta put 2 on there. But they wouldn't both work at the same time. The government inefficiency.
Phone quang.
What's funny is they took away our headphone jack and gave us the excuse, oh, we got to make the phone thinner. And then they make the camera bumps like this fucking thick. Like, you're not trying to make the phone thinner. You just want me to buy AirPods every 3 years.
My phone has a headphone jack.
Your phone does?
Yeah.
Lucky. I have an iPhone.
Of cell phones, some kind of cell phone quango, perhaps in the UK, right? It's comical. You can't imagine it happening. And actually, not only is this device...
So he's leaving something out. That Apple doesn't produce the cell phones. Fucking Foxconn does. And Foxconn is heavily tied to the fucking Chinese Communist Party. This guy's like leaving out a whole part of the process. Like the fucking, like the iPhones just come out of the front door of that fucking spaceship in Cupertino. Right? He's leaving out the fucking making the phone part, which we do rely on like a fucking, we'll euphemistically call it a public-private partnership in China to build the fucking phone. And by that, I mean Foxconn.
Yeah.
Like what does he think? Does he think the phone just magically came from the king of Apple?
He just has the Apple serfs build it, I guess.
I mean, that's what the fucking Foxconn employees are essentially.
Unfortunately,
made by a monarchy. If you look at any of the boxes that you get from your Apple,
that's where I thought he was going. I thought he was going to say like everything's made in China and they're a monarchy. But then
but then they're not a monarchy.
I know it's not, but like it's close. It's a whole lot closer to a monarchy than like fucking Apple.
But that would be a little bit, at least more interesting and fun to try to follow. This is just detached from reality.
Yep.
Somebody in
Also,
chat
like,
called
there's
him
plenty of-
techno-feudal. Oh, you've got somebody in chat just called this guy techno-feudalist Andy Dick, and I'm never not going to see that.
Well, like also there are plenty of corporations that are like co-op corporations, that are like owned and managed by the workers.
Right. Like Hertz, I think the car rental company of all things is an employee-owned company, or at least was for a time. Some fucking private equity firm probably fucked that up, right?
Probably.
People now everybody's we're gonna call the name of this episode is Techno Feudalist Andy Dick.
If you're listening on the podcast, there is a striking resemblance between this guy and Andy Dick.
Listen, Andy Dick is a giant piece of shit too, but if I was gonna go on a bender and possibly get arrested with one or the other, it's Andy Dick.
Agreed.
Unless Andy, I don't know. I might be complicit in sex crimes if we go out with Andy Dick. Oh.
I mean, probably. Well, I don't know about this guy, but wouldn't put it past him.
I wonder what this guy's thoughts on the age of consent are in a monarchy.
Designed by Apple in California, made in China. Guess what? There's another monarchy. And so, we live in...
So China's not a monarchy.
Yeah. Neither Apple nor China is a monarchy. This guy just doesn't know what a monarchy is.
I mean, I'm not a monarchy expert either, but Jesus fucking Christ. Yeah, somebody in the chat ruined this now because all I'm seeing is Andy Dick doing an impression of this guy at this point. This episode is ruined by the fucking funnier than us people in chat, as happens all the time.
Strange position where we're the product of 250 years of thought that absolutely excoriates this political system, excoriates it as much as the Soviet Union excoriated capitalism, and yet we see these incredible...
Was the Soviet Union a monarchy?
And did they succeed in their fight against capitalism? No, Soviet Union wasn't a monarchy. The leadership sure was into like fucking yeeting each other, but it wasn't their family members they were yeeting.
I mean, who knows what this guy thinks? It sounds to me like this guy thinks if there is a single leader, it's a monarchy.
Could never be done.
Though, just to
outside
push
of
back
monarchy.
slightly, in a monarchy, there can only be one monarch. That is the nature, of course, of a monarchy. And everyone else has to exist within the monarchist system.
That's right.
In terms of Apple, we know that Steve Jobs was himself a very complex character, very bad relationship with his children, a very
Bad person, really.
bad person in many
Okay, that's the first thing he said I agree with. Steve Jobs is a giant piece of shit. That's true.
And guess what? Apple fired him. You can't usually fire kings.
That's right. They fired him, and good on him for trying to go after his totally curable cancer by just drinking fucking juice and pooping everywhere. I think that was the best thing Steve Jobs ever did.
respects. In Chinese factories for Apple, they have suicide nets underneath the windows to stop factory workers
Indeed.
jumping out. What does that tell us about?
It's not to stop them from jumping out.
It's so they don't die,
It's
so
to
they can
stop
come
them
back to
from
work.
hitting the ground once they do.
So they don't die, so they can go back to work after they probably get their ass kicked for jumping out the window. I thought she was going to push back on the structure, and now she's just describing the bad things about the fucking way we get our iPhone. Like, lady, no. I mean, we all know these things. You're saying things that everyone's aware of. Like, man.
And like that is a result of capitalism, not
Right.
monarchy.
Well, I don't know. Is Elon Musk not the monarch of capitalism? That giant family he's having, trying to build out his own fucking royal network and shit. I hope those people don't inbreed. That wouldn't be great.
Monarchy.
It tells us that, the Chinese monarchy or the Chinese system, of course, is a very strange system because it has to deny in many ways what it is, as did the whole Eastern Bloc was a strange system of monarchies that evolved out of the most radical and egalitarian philosophies available. In a way, you
I don't
had...
know. No. See, this guy doesn't know shit. This guy doesn't know fucking shit. They leveraged the ideas of egalitarianism in the Russian Revolution to install a dictatorship. I don't know what else to tell this guy. Was it more egalitarian in many ways than Western society? Sure. Especially in the way that women were allowed to, or forced to, depending on how you think about it, engage with the workforce. They were it was awful white there, but they spent a lot of time making fun of Americans for being hella racist and stuff. But I think that was all propaganda. Like, what? This guy doesn't know fucking shit about fuck, dude. Like, why is this guy some kind of genius?
He definitely is not.
And the 20th century is it's a bad place to look for good monarchies. Good monarchies in the 20th.
Where do we go look?
Those good classic monarchies.
It's like we need to get
Those
into like
classical Western monarchies.
we need to get before like pre-Enlightenment Europe. We need to remember when they just didn't even have an open sewage system yet. That's the one. Seen that?
That's the perfect monarchy.
Anybody ever seen Robin Hood?
Century are relatively rare. They tend to exist at the
Clearly the villain of that story.
century.
Have you got an example of one
sure,
that works?
Lee Kuan Yew in Singapore, Nayib Bukele in El Salvador, Paul Kagame in Rwanda. These are all basically monarchs who basically turn, and even Deng Xiaoping in China. Now, the Chinese system is very short of perfect. It's also Chinese, so it's very alien to us as West.
No, that's sir, those aren't aliens. They're just Chinese people. They're us, but in China. Fuck off. What are you talking about?
What do you mean? There's not a single American who knows anything about China, except for him, clearly.
All very alien to us. This is so dumb too, because people talk about people hundreds of years ago, or people in other countries with very different societies, as if they're like almost like a different species than us in some ways. But motherfucker, those are just us, but in China. In the end, they care about the same things we do. They want to be able to eat, They might want something delicious. Fucking delicious ass food in China, I'm sure. They want their kids to be happy. They want other kids to get along with their kids. They want to have friends. Maybe they like to drink with the boys. You know, they don't want their sons turning into fucking incels. Like they're not different than us.
And they generally have the same societal problems too.
Right. This is amazing.
Westerners. And yet, if you look...
I wonder at the places he was naming off that had these fucking benevolent monarchies, I wonder if we looked them up, what we would find, right? That these good monarchs were doing maybe to the underclass or to people just outside of the norm of society. Like what kinds of massacres, what kinds of ethnic cleansing were happening within these societies that maybe have been overlooked by history.
Generally, you're not treated so well if you're not a member of the majority in a monarchy.
Even if you are, if you're not a member of the ruling class, that boot might be on your fucking face too.
Yep.
It's just a designer boot.
Transformation of China that, you know, in a way, the story of monarchy in the 20th century can in some ways be, and I don't mean monarchy in terms of the title or the old Western ceremonials. I mean monarchy simply in the sense of absolute power. You know, the irony of China in a way is...
So that's a dictatorship. You can have absolute power without a monarchy. A monarchy usually means an inbred royal family of some kind. That's my understanding. There's a king.
Yeah. A king who passes power down along the bloodline. Right.
And it might break the bloodline if the families, you know, marry and consolidate power with other families and that kind of stuff. But that's still based on a bloodline of now two families, essentially.
Yeah. Like a monarchy is a type of dictatorship, but not all dictatorships are monarchies.
And to be fair, I think the UK still calls itself a constitutional monarchy, and that's just a parliamentary democracy. So again, it doesn't matter really what you call yourself. It matters what you do.
Mao, who sort of epitomizes in many ways the worst of 20th century monarchies. And, you know, Mao and Stalin, both, you know, awful people. And
not monarchs.
Awful things. And one of the awful things that, well, both Mao and Stalin do is they come out of this communist party with many contending power forces. It's these divisions of power that Louis XIV is talking about. And Louis XIV saw as a young man coming of age, you know, his monarchy sort of defeated the Fronde, which was the kind of attempt to have an English civil war in France, and the French equivalent had a different result and produced the Sun King, and so he was very familiar.
I want to hang out with the Sun King. Or does that mean SON King? In which case, no, that's just the prince.
Effects of division, and those effects of division that we see in China. The Red Guards, you know, all the purges, et cetera, and the result, you know, it's a horrible period, right? But strangely, the result of that period is to leave basically unified power in China. And so when that unified power comes into the hands of Deng Xiaoping, he basically takes a country that's just wrecked and ruined in every possible way and turns it into, in many ways, the most successful country in the modern world.
So does decentralized power make it easier for a monarch to take over? Is that actually allowing for an easier transition into monarchy?
You know, every birth of a monarchy is sort of sui generis in a way. I mean, the word dictator, which of course is an ancient Roman word, the dictatorship was a legitimate office under the Roman Republic, obviously, and it was a temporary office. But the word,
well, in the Roman Republic, to be fair, there were a lot of people killing a lot of people. They worshipped. I think they everything was a little temporary then. Back then, people's life expectancies were much shorter, sometimes due to disease and sometimes just due to getting fucking stabbed.
Us means essentially the way the ancient Greeks used the word tyrant. And a tyrant was essentially a newly created, was a tyranny which we now is a loaded word meaning a bad monarchical government, was originally a word meaning simply a newborn monarchy. So if you look at Chinese dynasties in the pre-modern period, every founder of a dynasty is some kind of bandit prince or foreign warlord or general or something.
That sounds kind of based. That sounds kind of cool. Sounds like a movie.
Who sort of emerges out of chaos, and out of chaos sort of creates order.
Sir, you're this is mythology. This is mythology. This is all kinds of mythology. The new prince will rise out of the chaos when that's an anime. That's an American movie. That's a play. That could be a fucking that could be a He-Man cartoon. So that's just a story. That's the human story, is that a new leader emerges out of the chaos and, I don't know, probably fucking yeets all their enemies.
The ancient, I think it's a Taoist line, the empire long divided must unite, long united must divide. And so they sort of got used to this kind of cyclical structure of regime change and dynasty creation. And one of them.
Wait, they got you. This guy's doing that thing where they fucking compact history too, right?
Yeah, this is like he's talking about like 1,000 years of history.
Right, and people just got used to it.
Seen it before. This happened 200 years ago.
We lived through it.
Happening again.
Oh shit, we don't even live 40 years. Fuck. Oh, I don't know. Yeah, most people they didn't have history books during part of what he's talking about, so they wouldn't even. How would they know to be used to it in the first place? The printing press hadn't been invented.
Yeah, they would still write it.
Oh yeah.
But
it wasn't. But I'm just saying
the average person, yeah,
a lot of maybe the average person does or doesn't know, but it's not like everybody knew.
Yeah,
sort of features of that, kind of metaculture almost, is that one of the first acts of every dynasty was to write the history of the previous dynasty. And of course, that history became kind of a morality tale of the origins of the dynasty and how it fell apart and how it needed.
Friend, that's just a diss track. They're doing a diss track after they take over the block. They're going to write a diss track. I don't know. Get the fuck out of here. That they didn't write that. I mean, they did, but that's just a fucking. It's it's a diss track. They did a diss track. They're like, oh, did you lose? Oh, poor guy. I'm gonna immortalize you.
Replaced by
some
bandit warlord. But you can't really forget that. If you look at, there's sort of three forces of government: monarchy, oligarchy, and democracy. The rule of the one, the few, and the many. And if you basically look at...
Wait, no, a democracy can be an oligarchy. We live in an oligarchy that is a democratic republic, and it kind of has always been that.
Yeah.
Modern, what they would call Western democratic republics, or just fucking what they call the West. I don't like the fucking whatever. The fucking historically white people countries are almost all fucking oligarchies. Some more overt, like Russia and America now, and some a little less overt, maybe.
We just don't like to call ourselves an oligarchy.
Right. But, when money talks, then you have an oligarchy. That's it. I don't know what else.
Yeah, try running for president as a poor person.
Historical distribution of those regimes, it's 95% monarchy, 4% oligarchy, 1% democracy. You see, democracy is a very unstable, any kind of true democracy is a very unstable and even dangerous form.
Which of those?
Okay, the question here then, what do you mean when you say true democracy?
I think he means direct democracy, and I would agree with him on that.
Yeah, who has the time?
But has there ever even been a direct democracy? City states maybe, but bigger than that, and direct democracy becomes pretty much impossible.
Yeah, like I said, who has the time?
those three is contemporary America in your understanding?
Contemporary America is absolutely an oligarchy. And, the way that you can know that contemporary America is absolutely an oligarchy, and contemporary Britain, of course, as well, is simply, there's a simple exercise you can perform, which is, you can take a contrapositive approach and say, okay, let's suppose. Clearly, it would be an interesting sort of monarchy, but it would still be a monarchy if you elected a president with absolute power. If you actually, and I got retweeted.
No, that would be a democracy. You would just have a shitty system. That would be a shitty democracy, right?
Yeah, that's still a democratic republic because you're electing a representative.
And just one. And that's shitty. That's called the world's shittiest republic. It's not a monarchy.
And it would probably pretty quickly turn into a dictatorship if the president had absolute power, because the president would just say, okay, well, I'm always in power then.
And no more elections. Oopsie, you done fucked up.
Or we'll have elections, but I always win them.
Right. Or we'll have elections and I'll decide whether or not we'll decide whose votes count after we count the votes.
Yeah, imagine that. I won 95% of the vote. Clearly everyone likes me.
Oh, and those other 5% of people, they're criminals. Criminals, I tell you, criminals.
No, you have to have them just so, it doesn't look like you're a dictator. But, all the people who didn't vote for you, the people that, you're hiding, you just push those boxes of ballots over into the furnace.
Harris campaign for a Charlie Kirk clip in which I proposed this very dangerous idea that the winner of the election should actually take control of the government. And people
dangerous. What you did was predicted the future.
were like, wow,
controversial.
This is really scary, because essentially Americans have gotten really used to the idea that they're essentially electing Charles III. And in fact, one of the wonderful things about
most Americans don't know who the fuck Charles III is.
And the Biden administration is that electing this man who is palpably senile and actually incapable of, can barely function. People are like, how?
I don't know if he was senile. He was old. He had like old man fucking syndrome, and he was perfectly capable of being the president.
You didn't know that he's a medical doctor?
Who?
And Joe Biden is one of his patients?
Oh, no, I didn't. I didn't know that Curtis Yarvin is a medical doctor.
I didn't know that either, but why would you say something like that unless you were a medical doctor and Joe Biden is one of your patients?
And then that would be a HIPAA violation, as long as the HIPAA laws are still.
It would be incredibly irresponsible to diagnose someone medically without having known, their medical history or even being a medical doctor.
This guy isn't even a stoned first-year philosophy student in a dorm room.
But let's not say that he's being incredibly irresponsible here. Let's just assume that he is a medical doctor and that Joe Biden is one of his patients.
Guy at the beach in Delaware, all day, and the government still functions. Could Apple function with Tim Cook being at the beach all day?
Yes.
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 What? Of
Yes.
course. Yes.
Yes, of course.
Does he not know how companies work?
I don't know about that.
It's called the C-suite because there are multiple people.
And to be fair, in most companies, the CEO is like a big company. The CEO. Whoa. Oh, I shouldn't have hit that vape thing that hard. Live broadcast, everybody. The CEO mostly just does media hits, and is like the layer cake has them so like abstracted from the day-to-day work environment that people go to that they're not necessary, really.
I mean, I was absolutely shocked that when Steve Jobs died, Apple didn't just immediately collapse. Absolutely shocked.
I bet a lot
how
of them
can a company survive if a CEO dies?
I bet a lot of people who interacted with him had a little private party when he died. He was a fucking giant piece of shit.
Clearly, a company can't even survive if the CEO is on a beach one day.
I don't know about that.
But he was some sort of monarch.
Who was some sort of
Biden, in that sense.
No. Biden is really a ceremonial monarch. He's much more like Charles. He's much more like Charles III. I think that you can, if you.
So this guy seems to not understand delegation. Like if I have, let's say I do actually have like absolute power of an entire company, like Apple. I'm not going to make every single decision. I'm going to delegate those responsibilities to other people.
Like out of necessity, not out of being humble, out of necessity, because you don't have time to make every decision.
Yeah. Like Tim Cook's not sitting in the factory putting the screws in a brand new iPhone.
He's not even deciding who to contract that job out to.
Yeah.
Effects of Biden and Trump on Washington, I think I would say that without both of their personal decisions, say the withdrawal from Afghanistan would never have happened. So there is still some role of personal power there. But, I have a sort of relatively unusual experience of this because I grew up inside the administrative state, the civil service, the deep state, call it what you will. But both my parents and stepfather were like longtime Washington insiders in the service. And
what did you get in the service? See, like, what do you mean in this? This is my dad was a Green Beret, right? This is that bullshit. My dad was you just tell us your dad was a fucking spy and that's why he's never around. All right. Like whatever the fuck, dude, let's go. Like, what do you mean they were fucking inside the service? Does he mean they were in the military? Does he mean the U.S. Postal Service? Because that's who really serves.
I think he means just civil service.
So he means
they were civil employees? Okay.
So he means like they worked at the fucking FDA or...
Yeah, they worked for the federal government. Okay.
So my father, for example, worked at the State Department. And the way the State Department regards...
There you go. So he has a unique perspective because unlike everyone else in America, he has a family member who worked for the federal government.
The three of them. Deep inside the deep state.
Worked at the State Department. And the way the State Department regards the White House is this sort of strange thing that sometimes interferes in annoying ways with what they're doing. And
like a kind of fly in an ointment of their...
Yeah, and it's like when you're inside the civil service or the administrative state and you look at the effect of politics. Again, this is where political as a pejorative really starts to bite.
Well, that's because your job is a political job because you work for the government and the government is politics and politics is the government and whatever. Like political decisions could mean that your job gets erased and then they find out that you're in charge of the nuclear weapons and they're like, please come back. But what they mean because they don't want to talk politics at work if they work at the fucking State Department, or they may be talking international politics, but they're not. They're like career employees at the State Department, so they don't want to talk partisan American politics.
Yep.
Which is probably a real quick way to like not have friends at the State Department.
And ideally, you wouldn't want those people to be like blatant partisans. Like I know some people do, but you shouldn't want that. Or you should want your government employees to not be like
operators.
What's the word? Not have loyalty to one of the political parties.
Oh, I don't think that's. I think most of them are registered for one or the other party.
Well, sure, but imagine if a Democrat's in charge and they just start sabotaging all the work.
Well,
you
sure.
don't want that.
Sure, well, that's different. That's being able to just do your job and leave your ideas at home.
That's what I mean by loyal to one of the parties is like they would refuse to do a good job if they're working for one of the other parties.
Of course, you mean when you're saying political or you're saying populist, you mean democratic with a small d. And the idea that elections would affect U.S. foreign policy, which is supposed to...
no, you don't mean what? So we don't elect those people.
Right. And the idea that elections, hold on, he's going to say something really stupid about elections and foreign policy. Check this out.
With a small d. And the idea that elections would affect U.S. foreign policy, which is supposed to be made by foreign policy experts they went to Georgetown, they studied all of these things, they're highly professional, they probably have 20 or 30 IQ points on Biden or Trump or anyone in that position. And the idea that basically this reality show, which is American elections, would actually affect the very serious business of how do you make peace in the Middle East or whatever, is just, it feels utterly wrong to them.
No, people are not delusional. Obviously, who gets elected as the president and the Congress is going to affect U.S. foreign policy because those people run the federal government. That is is this like now? Oh, there was a time when the civil service was apolitical. No, fuck off.
It feels utterly, it's a violation. It's like, almost a desecration of a kind of temple.
To you, does that seem wrong? Are you on the side of the spooks here? Is there something unpalatable about...
The system is what it is, and like to actually change that and put the president in charge of the government is an almost unimaginable thing. And yet, if you go back, for example, to the era of Franklin Roosevelt, who really founded not just the modern American system, but founded really the global system of government. Really, FDR's regime really operates as a monarchy. So recently I was
no, he fucking nuh-uh. He's gonna say that that they did all this stuff like by like order of the president. Nah, dude. FDR was like calling people being like, oh, I am going to make sure that you are fucked if you don't vote for this. You're fucked if you don't. Because everybody wants this thing and you're fucked if you don't want to give it to them. Have a nice day. I mean, that's not what he said, but that was sort of like what happened. Mm-hmm. Like he used the power of persuasion to get the New Deal through because the American people were for the New Deal because the Great Depression was in people's living memory. Like this is
like the president is not a lawmaker.
This guy Harold Ickes, who is his Secretary of the Interior, and Harold Ickes is talking about cabinet meetings. Okay, so a cabinet meeting today in Washington is kind of like a kabuki thing, but a cabinet meeting
like a kabuki thing
of FDR was like a C-suite meeting in a corporation. It was a bunch of guys running things, sitting around, talking about what's going on every day and deciding what to do. And so you really had, FDR was really a true monarch, and he had many of the sort of,
a true monarch.
Actual power.
He was such a true monarch that they had. He was such a true monarch that they had to like stop letting people run for president because he would have just kept winning. Like
this guy is like insane.
Yeah,
or like I'm almost completely convinced he does not know what the definition of a monarchy is.
I never try to figure out what these people know and what they don't know. I'm very concerned that this is a person who has influence over essentially the oligarchs, actually, in our system. That is fucking troubling to me, because this is batshit crazy. You're correct.
Yep.
Power of a monarchy, also the symbolism of a monarch sort of came into play as well. Like, so for example, one of the things
that famous picture of FDR in like a giant purple king's outfit or something with a fucking crown
sitting on a throne.
Yeah.
Kind of astounds Americans today when they learn about it is that Americans did not know that their president for 16 years used a wheelchair. They actually did not know that he was handicapped. They were never told.
Well, I mean, we didn't know that Biden had degenerative dementia
didn't know
for
that
however many
Biden-
years.
Oh, get the fuck out of here. That is different than Now it's degenerative dementia. I just wonder, is that even a medical term? And if it is, does she have any clue what the addition of the word whatever, like, does she know how that first word modifies the second, assuming that that's even a medical term?
Like, most people don't even know that Biden died in 1998.
Oh, shit.
Yep, he's just been Disney animatronics since then.
Voted for him anyway.
Had degenerative dementia, so maybe these powers haven't changed that.
So you got two medical doctors here,
and one of them with a time machine, because nobody knew. Full people knew. There's no way nobody knew. You know what I'm saying?
I mean, people knew he was old.
Right. What I'm saying,
fucking Donald Trump is old.
Right. Well,
Donald Trump is crazy.
So I'm talking about FDR here. There's no way that nobody knew that the guy was using a wheelchair. I think people didn't talk about it. They thought it was maybe impolite or something. I don't know. And I don't think everybody knew. But there's not this isn't everybody or nobody. I think more people knew or suspected maybe than like it is talked about. I just can't imagine keeping that kind of secret.
Also, it's kind of ableist to think that like that matters. Like the president doesn't need to walk around.
No, what he's saying is the president was a monarch because he was able to hide from everybody that he needed to use a wheelchair. Which again, I don't think. I think that's like apocryphal. I don't think that's true. I think it's like that's some fucking legendary bullshit. If that's a proper way to describe it.
And so you have, that level of and so many things at that time are done in secret that, perhaps will never be known. Of course, he runs this incredible war. He conquers the world, basically, and
conquers the world.
Conquers the world.
Jesus fucking Christ. What is this guy? This guy, everything's just yes or no for this guy, right? Like the entirety of history is just a series of binary yes or no's on these very complicated questions, right? Is the intelligence apparatus and the diplomats, are they political? That used to be no, now it's yes. Did FDR take over the world? Well, wait, what kind of question is that? Just say yes or no. Well, he won World War II. I guess yes.
Yeah, America rules the world. You didn't know that? No country does anything we don't like.
Oh my fucking God. We took over we didn't even win World War II. The fucking Soviet Union did that and we took credit for it like the fucking assholes we are.
The American state and the American regime, and you basically see it as the monarchy of Franklin Roosevelt. Without Franklin Roosevelt, you see this oligarchy as basically a beheaded monarchy in a way. And one of my theories, no,
I mean, I'm fucking, listen, man, I'm all for using symbolism to help people understand complicated concepts in a simpler way, but symbolism shouldn't go the other way. When things are probably fairly simple what you're trying to do, but you use like really obscure and strange symbolism to describe it. That's not great. That's not how
inaccurate symbolism.
And it's either inaccurate, but it's that fucking mental masturbation bullshit too, right? Where people want to like fucking sound profound, so they'll say it's like I don't even remember what he just said, right? But whatever it was, you could have said that in a way different way that people would have maybe understood.
I think he said oligarchy is monarchy.
With its head cut off.
So like oligarchy is monarchy, democracy is monarchy, republics are monarchies. Like, is there any form of government that's not a monarchy?
If you cut off the oligarchy's head, it's not a monarchy anymore. I don't know, man. I'm having a really hard time following this bullshit, and I'm a bullshitologist.
I don't think the truth, this is just an interpretation of history that can never be known. But, many historians talk about the question of why FDR chose Truman. as his successor, because Truman was a lightweight. He was kind of a non-entity. He was not even really from FDR's wing of the party, because FDR was a progressive, and Truman had this kind of Southern machine politician background. He was a very small man. And my view, and there were a lot of factors that went, and FDR knew he was dying in 44. And that's without question. And my view is that
it was partially, so I don't remember this well enough, but I think part of it was that his vice president fucking turned on him or something. He had some fucking beef with his own vice president. And inside the Democratic Party, they knew there was reason to believe that somebody was going to have to be his successor, and he fucking made a deal. And that's how Harry Truman got it. It's politics. Friend, this is the thing. Politics is how that happened. This guy's like, this is the perfect time for it to be like, well, we can make this political, actually, because we're deciding this very political thing.
Yeah.
It was politics. That's why. Politics, baby. Things we know, things we don't know.
FDR had this very pharaonic conception of, he was not a modest man. Actually, he was very Trump-like in some ways, but he had much more self-confidence than Trump, which made him much more effective. And I think that he chose Truman because that was sort of...
He also had empathy, which Trump seems to lack.
Like, I'm the pharaoh. I'm actually the first man to conquer the world, because he thought of Stalin as his strong right arm. He did not see Stalin as a competitor at all.
What? So I took over the world because Stalin is my homie in the fucking... What the fuck? This isn't even an entertaining fake version of history, like that David Barton guy, right? I don't know if you know who I'm talking about, that religious guy who tries to fucking rewrite history to make it all about Jesus. At least that shit's funny. This is just like who invited this guy to the dinner party? Is there another party somewhere tonight? The person next to you don't even know. You're like, should we get out of here?
Like, this is one step away from him saying, like, aliens made the pyramids.
Right.
Like, I've conquered the world and I'm dying. Who is going to replace me? And his answer was nobody. And literally, by choosing a nobody to replace him, he takes this executive power, which he...
So first, Harry Truman was this Southern Democrat with this big political machine, and now it's nobody. Whoever it was, they had the political juice to get in that fucking position. This guy's an idiot. Whoever got there, they got there because they had the juice. Whatever the juice was, they had the juice. It wasn't just fucking FDR's decision. There was a politics happening at this point, I think. I don't
Yep.
It was I don't know all the ins and outs of it, but I think there was a politics. And this guy politicsed.
I mean, when you have to pigeonhole everything into a monarchy, you start losing all the details.
But somehow you can talk forever still.
Yeah.
Basically could tell the whole government.
You just make stuff up.
He was the king.
This is like if you trained an LLM on, like, if you told it, like, everything is a monarchy, no matter what it is, it's a monarchy. And you have to explain why it's a monarchy. And, like, don't worry about facts and history. Just, like, make up your own facts and history.
Who's going to have this power after me? Nobody. It's going to go down into this, amazing bureaucracy that he's created.
You mean the same bureaucracy that he was operating in conjunction with as the president? Probably the same bureaucracy that, when all was said and done, chose or was instrumental in putting Harry Truman in the position he needed to be in to be next. That bureaucracy? Is that what the one that is there the whole time? You mean like the rest of the government, he means? I think he means the rest of the government. This guy's a fucking genius. He cracked the code, HK.
And I can fault FDR on a lot of things, but the thing is, the people that he delegated to were very capable. If you want to think about New Deal Washington and how well it worked and how well it won the war, basically, it executed as well as the Silicon Valley startup. And it did it without...
Wait, what? Excuse you?
He delegated to were very capable. If you want to think about New Deal Washington and how well it worked and how well it won the war, basically, it executed as well as the Silicon Valley startup.
So it had a 90% chance of failing in the first year, and then if it even made it past the first year.
So I've worked at a Silicon Valley startup. They don't execute anything well.
Right. Some of them.
It's a shit show.
Right. Like they're operating on borrowed cash from some billion. Okay, that's America actually operating on borrowed cash from some asshole billionaire. That was probably the case after the war. Although they might have been like hundreds of millions. Rich.
Actually, yeah, maybe he's right. It did execute as well as a Silicon Valley startup.
But then he's then ascribing like winning World War II, which we showed up late to the party we showed up late to the party and were able to keep our composure after the Russians drank most of the vodka, right? Like
we helped a little.
Oh, yeah, we didn't not help, but we showed up late. Like it was like we act like we were outside the whole time, but we wasn't outside the whole time.
And I did it without any computers or anything like that, right? And
without anything like that. What do you mean anything? Like there were machines that helped them keep track of things.
For example,
nothing was efficient before Microsoft Excel.
Oh fuck! They didn't have Clippy. They had to use a fucking analog version of Clippy.
Just some guy. Hey, it looks like you're trying to write a letter. You want some help?
I just meant a paperclip, which is like a useful thing.
I hate to utter the word.
I got these paper clips.
It executed as well as the Silicon Valley startup. And I did it without any computers or anything like that, right? And if you look, for example, if, perhaps some of you out in the audience, I hate to utter the word, are libertarians. And, one of the things that I often pose to libertarians...
They're not. They're probably the fascists. They'll tell you that they're libertarians, but the people in that they're... anybody left in the fucking... What's left of the IDW now at this point, I'm sorry, they're just fascists.
Yep.
I know that they look respectable here in the Unheard studio, and I know that she's wearing just a fly outfit. Like some of the people might even like work in the civil service because I think this is in Great Britain. A lot of people work for the government there because their government does more for their citizens. But these people are fascist curious. I hate to cast. I don't hate to cast aspersions at these people in their audience. Fuck no, I'm casting aspersions. Let's go.
Fascists cosplay as respectable people. That is what they do.
Oh, you know how it starts out as the respectable people, or they tell you that they're a respectable person cosplaying as a fascist to trigger you, and then it eventually it eventually flips. The whole script flips. I never did that. What are you talking about? That was just I've learned. I've grown.
Is that, as an engineer and a Silicon Valley person in another life, I have to say that the most effective engineering project of all time was a government project. It was the Manhattan Project. And if you look at the Manhattan Project, it's run exactly like a startup, right down to the two co-founders, the technical and non-technical co-founders. It works like a startup. It is absolutely a top-down organization. It does not work like
I mean, it does work like he's wrong. It's standing on the work of a bunch of other people, right? Because they didn't just invent all that. Like they were close. Otherwise, they wouldn't have done this.
I mean, that is what startups do.
Yeah, they fucking, but then now everything's either a monarchy or a startup.
Yep. I mean, startups are just mini monarchies, right?
Well, Echoplex Media, monarchy. You know who your king is, and you know who the queen is, and that's the same person, actually.
Science today, it's like if you tried to do the Manhattan Project.
I probably get to be one of the nobles, right?
Or the way
for now. You know how being a monarchy and in a startup.
Science is funded in Washington today, which is very, very oligarchical and very sort of, focused on putting authority in the hands of the specialists. Someone would say, okay, we have to build a nuclear bomb. Here's the theory of the nuclear bomb. We need to...
Here's the theory of the No, that's not how this worked at all. What do you mean, here's the theory of the nuclear bomb? You go do it. If Eric Weinstein was in charge of the nuclear bomb, he'd be like, it's on the back of this napkin.
Well, it was. So the Manhattan Project was actually quite a bit like a startup where they had just unlimited investment.
Right. They had money.
Yeah. And they did have this like theory, if we do this, we could create a bomb. But like, they didn't actually know if it would work.
Right.
And they also didn't know if it did work, whether it would just blow up the world.
Which set
the world on fire is what I mean. Like not blow up the world, but like, set the atmosphere on fire. And
which is different than like painting the town red.
Mental advances in nuclear physics, in metallurgy, in computer science, in all of these different fields. So we're going to put out a request for grant proposals. And all the computer scientists and the metallurgists and the nuclear physicists are going to send in proposals to basically work on nuclear bombs. And what these proposals are going to be, if you've had any experience of the way science actually works today, is they're going to take their existing research and say, how would I spin this as to be relevant to nuclear bombs? And you might get a nuclear bomb in about 50 years out of that process.
In your conception of the...
What the fuck? Oh,
that is a blatant misrepresentation of science.
Right. And like, I bet people grifted the Manhattan Project like a motherfucker too. Don't tell me there wasn't nobody up in there grifting who didn't know what the shit they were doing, knew they didn't know what the shit they were doing, and were like, how much does this job pay? Yeah, I'm an expert. Absolutely, people were grifting the fucking. What is this guy talking about?
I feel like a lot of people like this guy don't understand that so much of the technology that we use comes from this like fundamental research science, like material science, chemical science.
It's downstream from it.
Yeah, like there's so much of these like basic science research projects that lead to this like explosion of technology.
Yeah, like things like the internet. That fucking. But like that's because like that's what the government does. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, if it's working well, that's what the government does.
There's money in it, but from the point of view of a society, there's money in it because it like generates economic activity if you have technological advancement or whatever, right? Like that's where the thing is that the good is for society, theoretically. Sometimes, hopefully, if there's no people like Curtis Yarvin and Peter Thiel.
This kind of ultra efficient version of a monarchy, there has to be some sort of accelerationist capitalist undergirding to the philosophy.
Not sure what you mean there exactly. Because
oh shit, me neither. Fucking thank you, Curtis. He's like, you didn't just repeat back to me what I just said, which I don't remember what it was anyway. But if you don't repeat back to me what I just said, then this is like a startup and not like an oligarchy and certainly not like a democracy. And I don't think it's a monarchy.
If you're running the country like a CEO and then each of the divisions of government or whatever it would be under a monarch would also be run in that way.
You cannot run the country like a CEO. It is impossible. Like you can do things in a company that you can't do in a country, and you can do things in a country that you can't do in a company. Like,
I think
and it should be that way.
If all you did was delegate to people with domain expertise, and that's what you did when you ran your company, and then that's what you did when you ran the country, I think you could do it. But I don't think most people do that. And I don't think most people think that's what the president does, which is what the president should do. He should be delegating and fucking deferring to domain experts, but that's not what's happening. We're done. We'll have to decide whether we want to watch more of this during the post game. But we're done. We're done with the podcast part of the show. This guy's out of his fucking mind. Like absolutely out of his mind. And you can hear little bits of what we've when we've talked about Peter Thiel and Eric Weinstein, you can hear little bits of that in this guy for sure.
Yep.
Especially
The
way
idea
he-
that science doesn't get us anything.
yeah, the way that he talked about the academic and like the system of grants in like mostly, I guess, professionalized science research, which would include academia. Although I don't even know if that's the right wording. And would professionalized science research, would that be an oligarchy, a monarchy, or a startup? I
But
thought
like
this was going to be. Oh, God.
there are things that science has like done for us, like things very recently that science has done for us that these people like, I don't know if they choose not to understand it, but like all they would have to do is some very basic research into like
I wouldn't
any
even call it
field of
research.
science.
I'd just say checking.
Yeah, very basic Googling into any field of science to see how much has happened in like recent years.
And how much of it goes back to like funding that government is given to scientific institutions, public science, and probably a lot of grifting happening. Don't get me wrong. Fucking, we live in a griftocracy, which is a certain kind of oligarchy, I suppose.
Yeah, but like the alternative is to just stagnate. You know, stop funding science, stop innovating,
Or we give all the money to Curtis Yarvin and Eric Weinstein and Peter Thiel.
that would be terrible.
They'd definitely find a way to build a new kind of weapon. That's what they'd do.
They'd just they would just hoard more money. I guess if they have all the money, they can't hoard any more. Well, that's not really true. Like people create wealth. So like they would just, you know, exploit their workers to create more wealth for them.
Yep. Well, that's the pod. Do you want to read the pod out?
Sure. Thank you for checking out the Intellectual Dollar Tree. We do this show every Wednesday at 7 p.m. Pacific on twitch.tv/Echoplex Media. If you want to check out our other shows or support us, you can do that at echoplexmedia.com. You can also support us at our store, eplex.store, and on Patreon at patreon.com/Echoplex. If you're listening live, stick around for after this song where we change the color of the lights and the contents of our drinks. And if you're listening to us on the podcast, we'll see you next week. Check us out live sometime. Now here is Boomers by Periscope.